All right. So, wanted to talk a little bit about Davante Adams here on the Memes of the Weekend podcast. So, Davante Adams is in a super interesting place. If you're interested in labor negotiations, like we talked about earlier on the show with Major League Baseball, and you're interested in collective bargaining agreements and labor versus management, which kind of seems to be a theme of this Memes of the Weekend today, is the duels between labor and management. One of the things that's interesting about Davante Adams right now is Davante Adams is a classic case of why the NFL put the franchise tag in the first place. Because as much as we talk about how like the Aaron Rodgers situation feels like it's really unprecedented for NFL history, that even the great quarterbacks of the NFL have never had the kind of leverage that Aaron Rodgers has right now, where he dictates the entire success of the Green Bay Packers at this point, as they, they're not as much in love with Jordan Love as they used to be. And Aaron Rodgers is entering 39 and he's coming off 2 MVPs and has the power to essentially choose what he wants to do with the rest of his career, the same way Tom Brady did as a player empowerment move into his 40s. And NBA players make these moves, and Major League Baseball is the original player empowerment sport. And all of this is very interesting because Aaron Rodgers' move also dictates the future of what might be the best wide receiver in the NFL on a team that we said the entire season was good enough to win the Super Bowl, and just happened to play a game in the snow where the best quarterback and the best wide receiver didn't have a connection because it was cold as shit and windy as shit and snowing as shit. And the Packers lost the game. And so Davante Adams is the exact reason why the NFL put in the franchise tag. This is a star player who does not necessarily want to play for the franchise that drafted them, and his rookie contract is now up, and he's available for an extension that in any other sport would command a record-setting deal. And the difficult part for Davante Adams is that he is essentially locked into a 2-year, $40 to $42 million contract, which again is unfortunate for Davante Adams. It's not like $21 million isn't quite his market value, although he'd make slightly more. The point of the franchise tag is that you make top 10 money in the NFL, but the franchise tag is incredibly pro management because for a star who would probably leave the Green Bay Packers at the end of this season, Davante Adams, who again won't have a fully guaranteed contract, even if he signs a 4 or 5 year deal, is essentially locked into a 2-year contract at top 5 money. But this is the problem for Davante Adams, is that say Davante Adams after those 2 years. And the reason I get to the 2 years, I should explain, is that the Packers can essentially franchise tag him this year and franchise tag him next year. And it would be a reasonably about 2 years and $41 million, which would make Davante Adams a top 5 paid receiver in the NFL, except for when you consider that if Davante Adams were to hit free agency right now, he would get a 5-year, $125 million contract with a good portion of that guaranteed. Let's say $80 million fully guaranteed. Now, the franchise tag is fully guaranteed, which good job by whoever was negotiating the franchise tag and the collective bargaining agreement on the union side, because getting a fully guaranteed contract on the franchise tag is an important step in a sport where only Kirk Cousins gets fully guaranteed contracts for some reason. But in the case of the Davante Adams situation, he could make about $80 million fully guaranteed right now if he signed with either the Packers or any other team, except he can't sign with any other team because he's going to get the franchise tag. But then the whole situation that complicates this is if Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay, is Davante Adams incentivized to get his money now and then force his way out later if he doesn't want to play for the Packers, except unless he gets a no trade clause in his contract, then he would have no say over his future, the same way Odell Beckham signed the giant contract with the Giants and immediately got traded to Cleveland 1 year later. This is the difficult part that Davante Adams finds himself in, is do you take the 2-year, $41 million contract essentially and sign on the dotted line for the franchise tag, or do you try and get the money that you would have in any other position earned after playing through your full contract. And this is the situation that he finds himself in, which is if Aaron Rodgers leaves, how much are you willing to use your leverage? And this is a conversation I had in the NBA, which was, we know Kevin Durant has extreme power in that sport. Kevin Durant is one of the players that if he joins your team, you're immediately a championship contender. And so franchises have to pay Kevin Durant in power as well as with money. In baseball, Nolan Arenado signed a gigantic contract with the Rockies, got a no trade clause. 1 year later, traded from the Rockies to the St. Louis Cardinals and got a 1 year extension along with being traded to the Cardinals, and the Rockies had to pay a whole bunch of his contract. Giancarlo Stanton, when he was getting traded out of the Marlins, declined to trade to St. Louis, declined to trade to San Francisco, and still ended up with the Yankees, fully guaranteed contract. And he has a level of power within that organization to dictate where he wants to play. We know those people have power. In the NFL, the sport is structured in such a way that they don't have to give up power to star players unless it's one of the 15 that really, really matter in the sport. And even in the situations where you've really pissed off your star, you can still end up crushing their chance to make things ugly, which is essentially the way that you get out in these sports, whether it's James Harden or whether it's Deshaun Watson before all of the legal stuff, or whether it be Nolan Arenado, or whether it be Giancarlo Stanton or anyone else in these sports. If you have the leverage, sometimes you have to make it ugly to get out. Jarvis Landry's trying to do the same thing right now. You could argue Odell Beckham made it ugly, but the point still stands is that using your leverage sometimes means burning public sympathies for you because sports fans overwhelmingly lean pro management. Some of that is happening to Aaron Rodgers right now. Aaron Rodgers just also happens to be kind of a jerk. And so this doesn't necessarily lead well for sympathies from the pure, I'm trying to force my way out of Green Bay situation. All of this connects to Davante Adams for, if we know Kevin Durant has power, we know Tom Brady has power, we know Giancarlo Stanton and Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado have power in baseball, does Davante Adams have the power? Because the Kyrie Irving situation was interesting because Kyrie Irving was like on the precipice of having enough power to force his will, and using the fact that he was willing to sit out games and give up money, and the fact that he was willing to use the leverage of Kevin Durant is going to come to bat for me and he has power within the Nets organization. Kyrie Irving got to do everything he wanted except be able to play and make money while being unvaccinated. And now he's back unvaccinated and getting paid for the Nets. Like, he used his leverage and power and got everything he wanted out of that situation reasonably. Like, he couldn't play in the state of New York, but reasonably got everything he could out of that leverage play. Does Davante Adams have that power within the Green Bay organization to make things ugly enough where he leaves? Because remember last year we did a podcast on this very topic with Kenny Golladay and Allen Robinson. Kenny Golladay and Allen Robinson just did not have the leverage at all. If Detroit hadn't decided they were going to tear everything to the ground, Kenny Golladay would have been franchise tagged last year, maybe on a team equally as bad as the Giants, still had 0 touchdowns, and Kenny Golladay doesn't get the $64 million that he got from the New York Giants because he only had the 1 year fully guaranteed. And I'm not saying that the same situation is the case for Davante Adams. At the same time, it's entirely possible that 2 years from now, Davante Adams can't even make up the money he could have fully guaranteed right now. If he could fully guarantee $80 million, 125 total, but $80 million guaranteed on a 5-year contract today, and doing the franchise tag thing will get him $40 million. That means in the last 3 years of his contract, Davante Adams would have to get $40 million fully guaranteed to be able to meet what he could make right now. And $40 million guaranteed in 3 years is about $13 million fully guaranteed. Ballpark right now, the average star player in the NFL gets about 60 to 70% of their contract fully guaranteed. There is no exact number for this, but it's around 60 to 70% fully guaranteed. Mahomes' contract was, I believe, it was less than that, but Mahomes had essentially an opt-out in his contract. Josh Allen was in the 60s. Russell Wilson was in the 60s. Cam Newton's contract with the Panthers was somewhere in the 60s. The point still stands, like, say 65% fully guaranteed. That means Davante Adams would have to be worth $20 million a year 2 years from now to be able to make up the money he could have made had he been an unrestricted free agent after this year, which is essentially to say, if the franchise tag doesn't exist, Davante Adams would make $40 million more fully guaranteed. So to make $20 million fully guaranteed 2 years from now, Davante Adams at age 27 would have to be still a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. Possible? Yes. But it'd be better for Davante Adams to lock in the money now, because it's not great odds that 2 years from now, Davante Adams will still be commanding the giant contract that he could sign right now. Odds are good that he'll still make money, but he's going to lose money because of the franchise tag. And this is why I've been anti-franchise tag for years now, is as I've shifted from being pro management towards pro labor a whole lot, as I've done a lot of unlearning and getting out of the sports world and kind of applying this to real life as well, like unionization being a big deal in the private sector of any economy, and the public sector already has high unionization and things like that. As I've just learned more about how this stuff impacts the world, it's more important in this sport to be pro labor, because as we talked about with Major League Baseball, fans already lean pro management, and management has way more power and way more leverage than Major League Baseball unions or players in the NFL. And that's just a general case, is management has much more power than labor, because labor is more disposable than management, and management has more money and more power to exercise their will upon labor. This is just the way that systems and structures have been set up in America. And so in the case of Davante Adams is losing money because the franchise tag exists. Even if he has to play 2 full seasons and still be a top 5 wide receiver and get another contract after the fact, Davante Adams could have still gone back and renegotiated his contract then. So Davante Adams is in a place where he loses money there, and at the same time, he could get that contract from someone else if he's willing to force his way out of Green Bay, which he is very clearly willing to do based on the decisions we've seen in the past with them doing him attaching himself to Aaron Rodgers and doing the last dance thing. Like, the fact he didn't sign the contract last year was very clear that he's not sold on Green Bay. And if he's willing to use all of his leverage to get out of Green Bay, I'm not 100% sure if that's going to be enough. Because again, it wasn't enough for Allen Robinson. It might be enough for Aaron Rodgers. It wasn't enough for Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson got checkmated into playing on the franchise tag. Chandler Jones wanted a new contract with the Cardinals, and he essentially asked the Cardinals to trade him if he wasn't going to get a contract, and the Cardinals forced him to fold, and he came back and played on the franchise tag. So Chandler Jones and Allen Robinson did not have the leverage. Aaron Rodgers does. Davante Adams is somewhere in between. I'm not sure even if Davante Adams is willing to make it ugly, if he has the leverage to get out of Green Bay, or if the Packers can say, we have no reason to trade you. Enjoy your time with Jordan Love for the next 2 years, and hopefully you play well enough to get a giant contract once we can no longer franchise tag you. It's a really weird situation that happens every year. Like franchise tags, we have the same conversation every year. At least we have for the past 3 years now, since we've been doing this podcast. We do the same franchise tag conversation every year. The rules have not changed. The rules are not going to change because they just passed the new collective bargaining agreement in the NFL. What's interesting about the situation is Davante Adams is the best player we can find who's headed towards a franchise tag, because nobody in the NFL in Davante Adams' position is willing to ride it out without getting the fully guaranteed dollars. And I don't know if he's got a wink, wink, nod, nod agreement with Aaron Rodgers, or if he's willing to use Aaron Rodgers' leverage to get him a new contract, or if the Packers are looking up and saying, if we lose Rodgers, we're incentivized to trade Adams anyways, and we'll work with him for a team that's going to sign him to a long-term contract extension. Maybe that's the move. But I assume Davante Adams doesn't know what Aaron Rodgers is doing, because I don't think Aaron Rodgers even knows exactly what he's doing at this point. And that's why this situation is incredibly, incredibly fascinating, as it looks like the Packers are going to franchise tag Davante Adams, and we'll find out in the next month whether or not he still has his quarterback or not.